In a crowded Brooklyn courtroom, an 8-year-old girl stood tall, holding nothing but a simple folder and the weight of truth. Accused of stealing nearly $18,000 from a community housing program, her grandmother faced a crushing battle. But this wasn't just any child's fight. With fierce determination and an unshakable love, Maya was about to challenge a powerful system built on prejudice and corruption. What happened next stunned everyone, turning a courtroom of doubt into a stage for justice like Brooklyn had never seen. This is the story of courage, wisdom, and the unbreakable bond between a granddaughter and her grandmother. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps give light to voices that deserve to be seen and heard. In the tense Brooklyn courtroom, silence cracked when 8-year-old Maya Johnson rose from her seat, clutching a homemade folder brimming with papers and notes. Her small frame belied the fierce determination shining in her eyes as she addressed the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to make a statement in defense of my grandmother," she said clearly, her voice cutting through the stillness like a sharp breeze. Judge William Carter, a seasoned jurist with over 3 decades on the bench, paused his writing and looked up over his glasses, stunned. Never before had he witnessed a child step forward like this in his courtroom. Around the jury table, expressions flickered between curiosity and unease. At the center of the storm was Dorothy Johnson, a 72-year-old woman accused of misappropriating $17,500 from the Bedford-Stuyvesant Neighborhood Housing Program, a community lifeline she had managed for 15 years. The judge offered a half-hearted smile tinged with discomfort. "Young lady, you should be in school," he said gently, trying to maintain courtroom decorum in this unusual moment. Maya's reply was calm, but charged with maturity far beyond her years. "I know, sir, but my grandmother has heart problems. She can't handle stress." Her words hung heavy in the air. "Her lawyer dropped the case yesterday when he found out he wouldn't be paid," Maya continued, voice steady. A ripple of murmurs passed through the room. David Richardson, the prosecutor, a sharp-dressed man in his 50s known for a near-perfect conviction rate in financial fraud cases, scowled with visible irritation. "This is completely irregular. A child cannot represent anyone in court," Richardson argued, adjusting his designer tie with thinly veiled disdain. "I'm not here to represent anyone, sir," Maya answered politely, turning toward the prosecutor. "I just want to tell the truth. My grandmother taught me that the truth always wins, even when it feels impossible." Judge Carter leaned in, intrigued. There was something in Maya's steadfastness that stirred something deeper in him, yet also a discomfort. The weight of history and systemic bias pressed against this young black girl standing before him. "Maya, you may speak for 5 minutes, but only as a witness," he ruled, ignoring Richardson's silent protest. Maya took a breath and opened her folder. The neatly organized papers immediately commanded attention. Newspaper clippings, photocopied official documents, and even hand-drawn illustrations she had made herself to highlight key points. "Your Honor, I've lived with my grandmother since my parents died in a car accident 2 years ago. She's always been the administrator of the housing program, and every Sunday night, we'd sit at the kitchen table, going over bills together," Maya began. Richardson moved to object but paused, caught off guard by the child's unwavering confidence. It was as if Maya knew exactly what she was doing. "Every Sunday, Grandma Dorothy would spread all the papers on the table. She'd let me sort the receipts by color, blue for expenses, yellow for income. It was our special time," Maya said, voice softening, then steady again as all eyes bore into her. Her posture spoke volumes, not of desperation, but of quiet resilience. Her gaze reflected the calm strength forged by storms far beyond her years, strength that doesn't shout, but acts. If this story of injustice and resolve moves you, don't forget to subscribe to follow how an 8-year-old girl transformed a courtroom full of skepticism into a stage for one of Brooklyn's most unexpected battles for justice. David Richardson barely concealed his contempt. To him, this was cheap emotional theater, a black child trying to shield a grandmother accused of corruption. Maya pressed on. On September 3rd, 3 weeks before the money went missing, Grandma Dorothy noticed something wrong in the housing program account. Someone had been tampering without permission. She held up a plain school notebook. She wrote everything down here. The prosecutor abruptly stood. Your Honor, this is ridiculous. We are wasting time with fantasies clearly coached by the defendant, Richardson declared loudly. Mr. Richardson, you can speak later if you want, Maya said politely, surprising some jurors. My grandmother always taught me to let people finish speaking. The truth was far more complex than anyone in the room had imagined. Dorothy Johnson had given 15 years of her life to the housing program, helping low-income families find decent homes in Brooklyn. She did it unpaid, driven by the belief that every child deserves a safe place to grow. 2 years earlier, when Maya lost her parents in a drunk driving accident on their way home from her school performance, Dorothy didn't hesitate to take custody. The trauma left Maya mute for months, burdened by guilt. Night after night, Dorothy sat by Maya's bedside, reading aloud legal documents and court cases she'd brought home from volunteering to help neighbors navigate bureaucracy. Knowledge is the one thing no one can ever take from us, Dorothy would say. When you understand how the world works, you'll never feel small in front of anyone. Maya's curiosity grew. She began asking about legal terms and procedures, showing a sharp memory and a natural grasp of legal logic that astonished even Dorothy's lawyer. Your Honor, may I show you what we found? Maya asked, pulling the courtroom back to the present. Richardson snorted loudly, audible to all. This is a circus. What credibility could a child have on complex financial matters? More than you think, Maya shot back, locking eyes with the prosecutor. Especially when that child learned to read legal papers at 6 years old because it's the only way to stay connected to her grandmother after losing her parents. A heavy silence fell. Even Richardson appeared momentarily unsettled by the bold personal revelation. With confidence unbefitting her age, Maya stepped closer to the judge's bench. On September 12th, $2,500 was withdrawn for emergency roof repairs at the community center. But my grandmother took me there the next day. The roof was fine. She held up a blurry photo taken on an old phone. This was September 13th, no sign of repairs. Richardson shifted uncomfortably, his case hinging on Dorothy's supposed mishandling of funds without detailed scrutiny of each transaction. Maya continued. On September 18th, $1,800 was withdrawn for security equipment, but no new equipment ever arrived, and on September 25th, $3,200 was withdrawn for outside legal counsel. She paused, eyes sweeping the room. Grandma Dorothy never hired outside lawyers. She handled all legal matters herself, with help from friends who worked pro bono. The jury leaned forward, curiosity turning to seriousness. What began as a child's curiosity was fast becoming a challenge to the very foundation of the prosecution's case. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps give light to voices that deserve to be seen and heard. Dr. Richardson, Maya asked calmly, turning her sharp gaze toward the prosecutor, did you verify whether the companies that received these payments actually exist? Richardson hesitated. A simple question, yet he hadn't bothered with this basic check. His investigation had focused solely on the administrator's responsibility. I see, he replied defensively. Maya's voice carried an unsettling maturity. So you assumed Grandma Dorothy was guilty without even investigating who actually stole the money? Each pointed question from Maya peeled back glaring cracks in Richardson's case. The prosecutor was beginning to realize he had gravely underestimated the situation. Building a shallow case, fueled more by prejudice against an elderly black woman managing public funds than solid evidence. What Richardson didn't realize was that every strategic question Maya posed wasn't a lucky guess or childish instinct. For months, she had meticulously studied every detail of the case. Her motivation was rooted not just in love for her grandmother, but in a fierce certainty that the system was set to destroy yet another innocent Black family. With each new revelation, something inside Maya grew. A silent, unyielding force born of the very injustice meant to break her. It was as if every act of scorn only carved another line in the sentence of her oppressor's defeat. "There's something strange about these transactions," Maya continued, pulling another envelope from her folder. "All these documents are signed by Grandma Dorothy, but she never signed any of these." She spread out several sheets comparing the signatures. "I learned about handwriting analysis at the public library. Even a kid like me can tell. They're different. Grandma's real signature has soft strokes. These are pressed down, too hard." Richardson rolled his eyes dramatically. "Now we're accepting handwriting analysis done by a child? That's ridiculous." Maya responded with impressive politeness. "Dr. Richardson, do you have any professional handwriting analysis proving these signatures are genuine?" The prosecutor faltered. This was another simple check he had never made. His focus had been on the most obvious aspects of the case. "I see," Maya said softly. "So you have no proof Grandma Dorothy actually signed these documents?" As Richardson struggled to respond, Maya's confidence filled the room. For 2 months since the charges surfaced, she had turned her nights into intense study sessions. But Maya wasn't alone. Mrs. Patricia Williams, a retired librarian and former paralegal, had become her secret mentor. Patricia spent 3 decades working in law firms and immediately recognized Maya's potential when the girl showed up at the library seeking books on legal procedures. "Sorry, Maya," Patricia had said 2 weeks earlier. "You have an exceptional legal mind, but we need to be strategic. They'll try to dismiss you because you're a child. You have to be 3 steps ahead." Together, they crafted a meticulous presentation. Patricia taught Maya how to order evidence, how to ask questions that expose flaws, and above all, how to stay calm under condescension. "But the most important discovery is here," Maya said, pulling out an official document. "This is a bank report showing that on the day the money disappeared, someone called the account at 2:30 in the afternoon. The call lasted 15 minutes. She held up another paper. "This is the medical record from Brooklyn Methodist Hospital, proving Grandma Dorothy was with me in the emergency room at that exact time. I was having an asthma attack, and she stayed with me from 1 to 5 p.m. A murmur spread through the courtroom. This was the first concrete, undeniable proof that Dorothy could not have made the transaction. Richardson rose nervously. "Your Honor, these documents were not presented during discovery." Maya was quick to reply. "Did you present any evidence proving Grandma Dorothy was present when the money was stolen?" Silence fell again. Richardson's entire case had hinged on Dorothy's technical responsibility, without verifying her physical presence at the time. Maya pressed on. "Did you check the security cameras at the housing program's office building?" Richardson's sweat began to show. "The cameras weren't working that day." "Interesting," Maya said with a knowing innocence. "Because I called the security company last week. They told me the cameras were working perfectly and even offered to provide the recordings for free to help Grandma Dorothy." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Richardson realized he was being dismantled systematically by an 8-year-old who had done the very investigative work he had neglected. "How did you get this information?" Richardson asked, his voice thick with anger and desperation. "It's simple," Maya said firmly. "When you love someone, you do whatever it takes to protect them. I've spent the last 2 months studying this case every day after school." Dorothy, who had remained silent until now, quietly began to cry. Her 8-year-old granddaughter was fighting for her with a determination and intelligence she had never imagined possible. Judge Carter leaned forward, clearly impressed. Maya, how did you learn to organize evidence like this? Mrs. Patricia from the library helped me, Maya replied. She worked in law offices for 30 years and said everyone deserves a fair defense, even if they can't afford one. Richard's face tightened as he realized just how much he had underestimated the case. This wasn't some desperate child trying to save her grandmother. It was a strategic partnership that had investigated the case more thoroughly than his own team ever had. But I have one last piece of evidence, Maya said, her voice growing serious. The most important one of all. She pulled a sealed envelope from her briefcase. Inside this is proof of who really stole the money from the housing program. Grandma Dorothy and I discovered the truth, but we wanted to give the real culprit a chance to confess first. Maya locked eyes with Richardson. Doctor, would you like to withdraw the charges against Grandma Dorothy before I open this envelope? Richardson hesitated. His career was built on being right, yet now he faced the terrible possibility that he had accused an innocent woman, driven by prejudice and a sloppy investigation. For a moment, as Maya held the sealed envelope in her small hands, everyone in the courtroom felt they were about to witness something extraordinary. But the slight tremble in her hands wasn't nervousness. It was the controlled power of someone about to rewrite history. Not only hers, but everyone's in that room. Richardson stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. I can't drop charges based on blackmail from a child. Calmly, Maya opened the envelope and pulled out a digital recorder. Dr. Richardson, do you remember this phone conversation from September 15th? She pressed play. Richardson's unmistakable voice echoed through the room. Tony, I need you to speed up this case with the old woman on welfare. It doesn't matter if she's guilty or not. My conviction rate can't drop before the Attorney General's election. A heavy silence fell. Another man's voice answered. Rick, are you sure? What if they find out we didn't investigate properly? Who's going to find out? It's a poor old black woman against me. The jury's already decided before they even walk in. Faces on the jury twisted in shock and disgust. Richardson's complexion drained, his career publicly undone in an instant. This is inadmissible, Richardson shouted, standing abruptly. That recording was obtained illegally. Actually, Maya said with impressive calm, it was obtained legally. Mrs. Patricia taught me about recording laws. This conversation took place on a public office phone, with clear notices about recording for transparency. Judge Carter's face betrayed his shock. In 30 years on the bench, he had never witnessed such a damning exposure of prosecutorial misconduct. Maya pressed on. Dr. Richardson, do you also remember this message you sent to Tony 3 days later? She held up a printout. The investigation needs to focus solely on the administrator's responsibility. I don't want detectives wasting time checking companies or signatures. Case closed in 2 weeks max. Indignant murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Jurors exchanged looks of disgust. Richardson's conduct was not mere negligence. It was deliberate corruption. But the most important evidence, Maya said, is in this document. She showed a bank statement. This is Dr. Richardson's personal account statement. On October 2nd, 3 days after Grandma Dorothy was charged, he received a deposit of $25,000 from a shell company. Richardson tried to speak, but his voice was a desperate whisper. That's the same company that received some of the fraudulent payments from the housing program, Maya added. You weren't just neglecting the investigation, Doctor. You were protecting your accomplices. The courtroom erupted into murmurs. Richardson had fallen into his own trap. Not only had he accused an innocent woman, he was deeply involved in the corruption scheme. Mrs. Patricia taught me something important, Maya said, looking directly at Richardson. She said people like you always make the same mistake. You think you can step on those you consider weaker without consequences. Dorothy, silent throughout the presentation, slowly stood. Dr. Richardson, For 15 years, I dedicated my life to helping families find decent housing. You tried to destroy that for money and political ambition." Richardson hung his head, utterly defeated. His reputation, career, and political future shattered by an 8-year-old girl he had gravely underestimated. "Maya," Judge Carter said, his voice trembling with emotion, "in my 30 years on the bench, I have never seen a presentation of evidence as thorough as yours." "Thank you, Your Honor," Maya replied humbly. "I just wanted to clear Grandma Dorothy's name and make sure true justice was served." The judge turned to the prosecutor. "Mr. Richardson, in addition to immediately dismissing the charges against Dorothy Johnson, I am ordering an investigation into prosecutorial misconduct and corruption in this case." Richardson tried to protest but staggered. His arrogance gave way to panic. He wasn't just going to lose the case, he was facing criminal investigation. "Lose, Your Honor," Maya said. "I want everyone to know I didn't do this out of revenge. I did it for the love of Grandma Dorothy and because every child deserves to see justice is possible, even when it feels impossible." The courtroom erupted in spontaneous applause. Some jurors wiped tears from their eyes, not just for Dorothy's proven innocence, but for the powerful reminder that intelligence and determination can overcome privilege and corruption. As the applause echoed and Richardson was escorted out by security, one question lingered. Could this 8-year-old girl have planted the seeds of change that would grow far beyond these courtroom walls, transforming not only her own life but inspiring an entire generation to believe that age, color, or background never define the size of the dreams we can achieve? 6 months after the trial that changed Brooklyn, at 9 years old, Maya sat in the front row of the city's law school, not as a student, but as a guest speaker. She had become the most famous civil procedure case study of the past decade. "True justice," Maya told an audience of 300 future lawyers, "doesn't happen when you defeat someone. It happens when you protect those you love and teach others to do the same." In the front row, Dorothy smiled proudly. Her health had improved dramatically since the charges were dropped. The housing program, now under transparent new management, had received record donations inspired by the Johnson family's story of integrity. David Richardson faced a very different reality. After a federal investigation, he was convicted of corruption, prosecutorial misconduct, and fraud. He lost his law license, served 2 years in prison, and now worked as an insurance salesman in a small town where no one knew of his shameful past. "People ask me if I feel sorry for Dr. Richardson," Maya continued during the lecture. "I do sorry for someone who had so much privilege and decided to use it to hurt innocent people." Mrs. Patricia Williams, now officially Maya's mentor through a university program, sat in the audience. Together they created the Maya Project, teaching children in underserved communities about their basic legal rights. The program was operating in 25 Brooklyn public schools, empowering hundreds of children with the knowledge that they have a voice and power. "Maya taught us something fundamental," said the college dean. "Knowledge without character is dangerous, but character with knowledge can change the world." Maya's life had been transformed. 3 large law firms had already offered her full scholarships for college. National media covered her story, but Dorothy always shielded her granddaughter from the spotlight, ensuring Maya had a normal childhood. The case inspired significant legislative change. Known as the Maya Law, New York State passed a bill requiring prosecutors to present concrete evidence proving a defendant's physical presence at the time of the crime in grand larceny cases. Other states began considering similar reforms. At the end of the lecture, a student raised her hand. "Maya, are you going to be a lawyer when you grow up?" "I don't know yet," Maya answered honestly, "but I know I want to help people understand they have more power than they realize." Dorothy, now recognized as Brooklyn Citizen of the Year, used her platform to advocate for welfare reforms. She was invited to join a city council overseeing social programs, ensuring transparency and efficiency. "My granddaughter taught me that age does not define wisdom," Dorothy said in national interviews, "and color does not define ability. Sometimes justice needs to be reminded of its own principles." Richardson made several attempts to apologize to Dorothy, even sending letters from prison. She refused all contact, not out of spite, but because she had moved on to bigger and more important things. "Some wounds," she told Maya in a quiet conversation, "don't need forgiveness for us to move on. They need justice, and we got justice." Judge Carter kept a framed photo from the trial on his desk, a daily reminder that true justice can come from the most unexpected places. He became more rigorous in reviewing evidence presented by prosecutors, citing the Johnson case as a landmark of due process. Maya remained a normal kid, playing basketball at school, watching cartoons on Sundays, getting into the usual mischief of a 9-year-old. But she carried a wisdom about justice and determination that impressed adults across the country. The Bedford-Stuyvesant community had been transformed. The housing program became a national model, and Dorothy was invited to consult in other cities. Maya often accompanied her, always carrying her now famous organized binder. On one of these trips, a reporter asked Maya what the biggest lesson from the case was. "I learned that when you're right and don't give up, the system can be fair," Maya said, "but you have to be ready to prove you're right." Mrs. Patricia, watching Maya answer questions with maturity, later said, "This girl didn't just save her grandmother, she restored my faith that the next generation can fix what ours broke." The story set a precedent. Lawyers began citing the Johnson case in procedural misconduct trials, and law schools included it in professional ethics courses. "The difference between being a victim and being a winner," Maya always said, "is not what happens to you, but what you decide to do next. Grandma Dorothy taught me, knowledge is power, but love is courage." Richardson tried to destroy an innocent family, but ended up destroying only himself. Maya and Dorothy emerged stronger, inspiring a generation of children to believe their voices matter. The Johnson family's story proved age does not define ability, color does not limit potential, and when love meets knowledge, miracles can happen, even in the most unlikely places. Maya had planted seeds of change that would grow far beyond the courtroom, transforming her life and inspiring an entire generation to believe justice is possible. If this story of justice and overcoming adversity touched your heart, subscribe to the channel to discover more real stories that prove the best revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you. It's building something so great they could never imagine. What about you? Have you ever had to fight for someone you love against a system that seemed impossible to beat? Share your story of determination in the comments. Because, as Maya taught us, every child and every adult has more power than they realize when they decide that justice is worth fighting for. Sometimes true revolution doesn't happen with shouting or violence. Sometimes it starts with an 8-year-old girl, an organized folder, and an unshakable belief that truth and love always win in the end. Thank you for joining us on this journey of courage, compassion, and the quiet strength that changes lives. In a world that can sometimes feel overwhelming, remember, small acts of kindness and the courage to stand for justice ripple far beyond what we see. Each of us holds the power to make a difference, sometimes in the most unexpected ways. If this story touched your heart, please consider sharing it with others who might need hope today. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Kind Light Stories to discover more tales that remind us all of the light within humanity. As poet Marianne Radmacher said, "Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes, courage is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, 'I will try again tomorrow.'"